okay?
Right. Budu Saranai, the most respected Bante Sujato, Venerable Vajrarame Jnanasiha Thero, Venerable Theros, committee members, special invitees, Dhamma friends, I'm pleased to welcome you to this special Dhamma talk that we are having today, conducted by the International Dhamma Program on the theme Dependent Origination and Guided Metta Meditation. This is conducted by, as I said earlier, by Bhante Sujato, the co-founder, Buddhist website, Sutta Center. I would like to introduce Bhante Sujato before the Dhamma talk. Bhante Sujato, known as Ajahn Sujato or Bhikkhu Sujato, is an Australian Theravada Buddhist monk ordained into the Thai forest lineage of Ajahn Chah, a former musician who played in a successful rock band called Mata's Vineyard. Sujato,
Not that successful, Lakshman, but we'll let that go past.
Yeah, Sujato became a Buddhist monk in 1994. He took higher ordination in Thailand and lived there for many years before returning to Australia. He spent several years at Bodhiana Monastery in Western Australia, Perth, before going on to found Santi Forest Monastery in 2003, where he served as abbot. Following Bhante Sujato's wishes, Santi became a nuns monastery in 2012 and he returned to Bodhiana. In 2005, Bhante Sujato co-founded the Buddhist website Sutta Central to provide access to early Buddhist texts in their original language and make translations available in modern languages. Bhante Sujato moved to the island of Chimal off the coast of Taiwan to undertake the task of creating English translations of the four Nikayas, living there from 2015 to 2018. Bhante Sujato has translated over 1 million Pali words to English, a feat unmatched and needs recognition for the great services rendered to the Buddha Sasana. As I said earlier, Bhante Sujato is the co-founder of Sutta Central, which contains all these materials as edition books, which you can access free of charge. I must thank Ms. Deepika Veerakon, who has greatly assisted us in the organizing of our Dhamma programs. Deepika is in charge of the Sutta Central Development Trust, which is a charitable trust and manages the trust and its funds. And if you wish to make any donations, you can kindly contact her or let me know. So with that introductions, I would invite Bhante Sujato to deliver Pansil and then commence the Dhamma talk. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so very much, Lakshman, for that very kind and comprehensive introduction. One small correction, if I may. The island I stayed on in Taiwan is called Chi Mai.
Chi Mai.
Oh, Chi Mai, yeah, Chi Mai. It means 7 maidens.
Thank you.
And it is named after there's a legend that there was a shipwreck and 7 maidens were washed up on the shore. And they live there, and there's currently a shrine to them. So they have like a spirit shrine to the 7 maidens of the island. So that's what that was named after. All right, thank you very much. Let us begin with the Tisarana and Pansel. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Imani panchasikhapadani silena sugatin yanti silena bhoga sampada silena nibbuttin yanti tasma silang visodhaye. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So thanks so much to all of you who are present, and with the permission of Venerable Nyanasiha, and with the blessing of the people here, may we proceed to, we were going to do some guided meditation. Is that correct, Lakshman?
Are we
Or
going,
straight to the
you
Dhamma
want
talk?
to do it first, or you want to give the talk and then do it? Maybe
I'd
we
like
can
to
start with the guided meditation. Yeah, we'll do
do
that.
the guided meditation, because then
Yeah.
that puts people into a good mindset
Yeah.
for the talk. So we won't spend too long on the guided meditation, but about maybe 10 minutes or so, okay? And we'll do a short guided metta meditation. Before we begin the guided meditation, I'll just say a few words about meditation. Let me run over some of the fundamentals of meditation, because it's always important to remind ourselves of the basics, even if we've been meditating for a long time. So we have already laid some of the foundations for meditation. We have taken the precepts. We have joined together with our good friends in the Dhamma, and we have set aside time for meditation. So our mind already has a foundation and a focus towards the Dhamma to some extent. Now, for each time we meditate, we need to establish a time when we're going to be relatively free of distractions and able to focus and concentrate on our practice. We also have to find a place that we can meditate. Yes, it's true. You can try to be mindful while you're, on the bus or while you're doing your chores or something, but that's not really what meditation is. Meditation is a dedicated and specialized spiritual practice. You need to find a place where you're going to be reasonably undisturbed for that period of time. So we find a place where we can settle down and focus for that time. Next, we also need a posture. So these the Buddha always would begin his meditation by saying, crossing his legs, setting his body upright. So let's make sure that our posture is correct. So either sitting on the floor, and if we're sitting on the floor, make sure that you're sitting in a good posture. If you're not sure what a good posture is, I'm not going to try to teach you that right now, but I would encourage you to maybe go find a yoga teacher or find somebody who can show you how to sit properly and give you feedback on your posture. Because I see a lot of people sitting on the floor in very poor posture. And so if when I'm on retreat, and then I will usually work with people to try to show them what a good posture is, because if your posture is not good, your meditation will not proceed. If you're sitting in a chair, as probably most people are, then make sure for meditation, I understand for this talk we can't necessarily choose that, but normally for a meditation you should have a chair with 4 legs. That means not a folding chair, right? Not a swiveling chair, not a couch, right? But a chair with legs that's quite solid. not something that's going to wiggle, something that you can feel a little bit of support in your back, and something a little bit enough cushion, right? So it's not going to be too hard, and something that you can sit upright, dignified, and in a posture that the posture for meditation has both attention and also balance, right? Attention and relaxation. Yeah? So we need to have both of those things. If we're sitting too slack and then that's not good for meditation. But also, if we're sitting too tight and the mind's hard, also not good for meditation. Yeah, you need to have that relaxation. When your spine is correctly balanced and your alignment of your body is good, then your body will relax and that supports your meditation. Now, you can't always do that 100%, right? Because our bodies do have imbalances and tensions in them. So we just do the best we can. As we go on, then listen to your body and let your body tell you how to find its own sense of center and relaxation. And like I said before, it's not as obvious. To sit meditation well is not as obvious or easy as we might think. So I do encourage you to go to maybe take a few yoga classes and just talk to the yoga teacher and get them to give you some feedback on your posture to help to maybe adjust it or correct it if that needs to. And that will make your meditation better and smoother. Also, less back pain, less knee pain, less leg pain. So time, a place, a posture. Next thing we need is a meditation subject. Okay. For this meditation, we're going to be meditating on metta. Many of you know metta, sometimes translated as loving kindness or friendliness or love. And it is that universal wish of goodwill to all sentient beings. Now, when we are practicing metta, the number one thing to bear in mind is that metta is not words, metta is not an idea, metta is not a doctrine, metta is a feeling, it's an emotion. And so all of the teachings you've heard around metta are not what it is. All of those chants that you've chanted about metta are not what it is. Yeah, metta is an emotion, and as such, it's part of our humanity. So when the Buddha talked about metta meditation, he talked about metta bhavana, the growing of metta, yeah? The amplifying of metta, the making metta become more. That is what metta is. Metta meditation is. Now, there is a subtle thing that is implicit in this. If we are to grow our metta, that means that there must be some metta there to begin with. Yeah, this is the assumption. Just like if we're doing mindfulness of breathing meditation, there's an assumption that actually everybody is breathing. Same thing with metta. Everybody has some metta inside them. I mean, maybe, sure, it comes and goes and there are other moods and conditions. It's not there all the time, but we have that capacity and that potential. So the purpose of doing metta meditation is to let us find that and bring that out and develop it, grow it, make it flower, make it full. That's the purpose of our metta meditation. Now, for today's meditation, we're going to do a simple practice. We're just going to do metta. We're going to begin with doing metta for oneself, and then we're going to do metta for a loved person. So you can choose anybody that you like who's a loved person, and we're going to do metta for them. Okay? So let us begin. So sitting quietly. Allowing your mind to settle back inside your body. And just spend a minute scanning through your body, getting in touch with the different feelings and sensations. Now, when you feel your mind is reasonably centered, then silently to oneself say the words, "May I be happy, may I be happy, may I be happy." Repeating those words again and again and again, evenly and steadily, easily, with a sense of flow, with a sense of meaning, not just mindlessly repeating them, but genuinely putting your heart into that pure, wholesome wish for your own true happiness and well-being. May I be happy. May I be happy. May I be happy. Noticing that as you continue with those words, you also begin to see feeling of metta, soft, gentle feeling of warmth and love that spreads through your body, soaking through each cell, each part of your body, taking away any stress or anxiety, and just filling your whole body with that lovely, pleasant feeling of love. Now let's take that same metta and spread it out to the loved person. Just one loved person, it doesn't have to be everyone. Someone that's easy for you to feel love for. May they be happy. May they be happy. May they be. Now we're coming near to the end of the meditation. I want you to bring your mind back from a loved one to oneself. May I be happy. May I be happy. May I be happy. And letting the words of metta go. Letting the feeling of metta fade away. And allowing the mind to come back to a neutral space, empty, open and clear. And with the mind open and clear, just take a minute to reflect back over the meditation we've just done together, inquiring into cause and effect. Ask yourself, what just happened? How did my mind change? How did I use my mind through that meditation? What was helpful? What was obstructive? And how does my mind feel like now at the end of the meditation? Finally, we can dedicate the merit of our practice. May all beings be happy, may all beings be well, may all beings realize Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, very good. So I hope that's nice for you all. And it's always lovely to reach that point in the day where we can just spend a little time forgetting about all those things that don't matter, that we normally spend all our time with, and remembering those things that do matter. And it seems that in this world that we live in, the funny thing about the world is that we all know how important it is for people to love each other. And we know how devastating and horrifying the effects of hate are. And yet, wherever we go, people seem to be drawn towards hate and drawn away from love. It's a strange thing, isn't it? Something so simple, so obvious, and yet we keep on getting trapped in that again and again.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
So, time to begin the Dhamma talk?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. So while we're doing the Dhamma talk, I think we'll have some time for some questions or something at the end. Is that correct?
At the end, yes, about 10-15 minutes time.
Great. So if any in the audience have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A, and we'll have a look at them at the end if we get the chance. So I have been asked to talk on the topic of how do we explain rebirth without a soul. And when I saw that was the topic, I was like, oh, thank goodness, a nice, easy topic for a Sunday evening. That's excellent. And why is that an easy topic? Because it was explained very well by the Buddha. So I don't really have to do much, but maybe give a few metaphors and similes and things like that, because this is something that was explained by the Buddha in detail when he taught dependent origination. And in fact, is one of the major purposes behind such a fundamental teaching of the Buddha. And yet, for some reason, there seems to be a lot of confusion about that these days. When I say for some reason, honestly, the reason's not that hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first address the question of how rebirth happens without a soul. I'm going to address that very briefly and very simply. Then I'm going to talk about the reasons why this is often regarded as being something more complex and difficult than it really is. And finally, if I get the time, I'm going to go back to the original topic and talk about that more in some technical details, if everybody hasn't fallen asleep by then. But anyway, it's your afternoon, so hopefully you're not falling asleep. Okay, fine. So how does rebirth happen without a soul? It happens without a soul because we are part of a process. Because what we experience in our life is an ever-changing process of thoughts and feelings, perceptions, our bodies always changing, our minds always changing, and those changes don't happen randomly. They happen according to causes and conditions. So we are a different person now than we were 5 minutes ago, a different person than 10 minutes ago, a different person than yesterday, the day before when we were born. But there's also a continuity, and that the impermanence of everything that makes up who we are is that fundamental teaching that the Buddha gave on impermanence. And the teaching on conditionality explains the continuity. So impermanence doesn't mean, it's not like we're just a line of sand, right? It's not that there's just no connection between things. Things are connected with each other, like a river, for example. So that process of change we observe every minute of every day. And there's not one single minute, not one single second that we can look into our mind and say, well, nothing is ever changing. That's all we know. It's all we ever have known. And crucially, it's all we ever can know, because the function of consciousness itself depends on conditions that are always changing, dependent on the I, forms, rises I consciousness. The I consciousness depends on our eyes. Our eyes are always changing. We're moving directions and all of those things. What we see is also changing. Eye consciousness is always changing. Ear consciousness always changing. Nose, tongue, body, mind consciousness even more so. So these things are constantly changing. So what the Buddha said was that when we die, it's just another change. Everything's always changing. Death is a change. The word death, in a way, is just a label we use for the biggest change of all, that's all. And so if what's happening here is conditioned and changing, what happens at death is even more so conditioned and changing. And since the process of rebirth and what happens at death is fundamentally a process of change, the only way we can explain that is through a process of change. We can't explain rebirth by introducing something which is unchanging. That doesn't make any sense. Rebirth is just another process of change. Now, one of the best similes for this was a simile given by the great teacher, who many of you will know, Venerable Hanapolo Gunaratana, many years ago. And I honestly haven't heard him. I'm not sure where he gave this teaching, but I've heard it from other monks. I learned it from, don't know, maybe Ajahn Brahm or someone. Anyway, I can't even remember where I learned it. Anyway, it's the simile of the fax machine. Many of you hopefully will remember what a fax machine is. We were alive in those old days when we had fax machines. And a fax machine, you have a sheet of paper, print is on that paper. We put the paper into the fax machine, it goes buzz, 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 and then it sends the message to the other fax machine, which then prints out the original document. Now, interesting. So just to slow down and see what happens here. The original document is paper with ink printed on it. Now, when that's put into the fax machine, there's no paper inside the fax machine. There's no ink there. It's converted into digital information. There's not like one single particle which goes from that paper into that fax machine. And yet there's a process of conditionality. That digital information is, of course, just ones and zeros. Ultimately, it's just switches that are turned on or off. It's electricity that's either flowing or isn't. That's what binary information is. It's either a flow of electricity or it's on or off. And that has a certain pattern. And that pattern is repeated down the line. But when electricity flows, electricity doesn't flow like water, right? So you don't get one blob of electricity here and then that blob moves down to there. That's not how it works. But the pattern repeats itself down the line. The pattern of potentials, ons and offs, ones and zeros, to the next fax machine, which then prints out the new piece of paper. That new piece of paper has not one atom in common with the original piece of paper, completely different entities. And interesting, it's also the writing, the image on the fax, okay, is not exactly the same as the original image, because there's always some imperfections and some flaws that are introduced during that process. But the meaning of the words is exactly the same. That's the important thing. The meaning of the words is exactly the same, and that's transmitted through that whole process. So there's not like a physical thing. So rebirth is much like that. So what in the fax machine simile is the meaning of the words, for us, that is our memories, our karma, our character, our personalities, all of those things that provide a sense of continuity from one life to the next. And so no one thing goes through that process, but if you like, information is transferred. In fact, consciousness is transferred. Right? Information is a part of what consciousness is conscious of, but consciousness itself is much more subtle and much deeper. So that's the theory of how rebirth happens without a soul. And I've taught it just by trying to explain it in plain language, and I've taught it by reference to the facsimile. We can also teach it in the context of dependent origination. And I'll come back to that a bit later on. But I wanted to go to the second part of my talk, which is on why this issue is problematized, why people make a problem out of it. And look, let me just say this. I think that there are things in the world and things in Buddhism that are genuine problems and that are genuine conundrums and philosophical conundrums. And I think we find things like that in the Dhamma as well. We find things that are genuinely hard to understand and about which, it's difficult to really reach a decisive answer. I don't actually believe this is one of those things. I think this is actually pretty clear cut and has a fairly straightforward answer. I don't think that there's a genuine problem being raised here. I think that this is a pseudo problem being caused by people raising issues because of their own backgrounds. Now, the Buddha taught dependent origination as the middle teaching, the Majjhima Desana, between two extremes, the extreme Sabbangati and the extreme Sabbangati. And so the extreme Sabbangati, everything exists or everything survives or everything exists forever. Sabbangati, everything does not exist, everything does not survive, everything does not live forever. And these are the two extremes often described as eternalism and annihilationism. Now, in our modern world, just as in the time of the Buddha, these two extreme, what the Buddha regarded as extreme ideas are very common. And of course, on the eternalist side, of course, the Buddha taught in a context where there were many of the people teaching the Vedic or Brahmanical religion, which is an eternalist kind of religion, believing the Atman as the eternally existing soul. Others, such as the Jains, for example, had a different belief, but they also believed in a jiva, another form of eternal soul. In the world that we have today, of course, most of the people in the Abrahamic religions believe in a variety of eternalism. They also believe in an eternal soul that will live with God after death. Of course, there are a variety of views within those traditions, of course, but generally speaking, that's what people believe. So in contrast with that eternalist belief, we also have a lot of people today who don't believe in any of that stuff, and they dismiss any kind of belief like that as religious, by which they mean just a meaningless dogma, which is trying to only there in order to extort money out of naive people. And so they believe that we're just made of matter, 4 elements, and then when we die, our bodies are disposed of, and that's it. There's nothing left of us. And of course, there were people who believed that in the time of the Buddha as well. We don't really have statistics at the time of the Buddha. It would have been interesting to know how many people believe these different ideas. But today, obviously, there are many people who think like that. And so I'm going to look a little bit how those perspectives shape people's attitudes towards this teaching on rebirth. Now, from a perspective of people who believe in a soul, like eternalist beliefs, usually from a eternalist point of view, Buddhist teachings are always very difficult to understand, and it's very hard to get your head around it, especially if you believe in God or you believe in a soul, and that these beliefs like inform your values and your point of view in such a fundamental way. It's very difficult to sort of put yourself in the shoes of somebody who believes something quite different. And I think the same thing's true for us as Buddhists. Now, I'm saying us as Buddhists, but I'm also aware that we have whatever it is, 155 participants on this forum, by which, by the way, congratulations to Lakshman and all those who've organized for bringing so many people together. And I'm sure that there are quite a number of people who are on this talk who maybe aren't Buddhists, maybe people who are Muslims or Hindus or Christians, or people who are atheists or free thinkers or whatever you might call yourself. So I'm aware that people will have all different kinds of views. So I don't want to misrepresent your views, and I don't want to overgeneralize. But I think it's important that we as Buddhists need to, in a way, kind of put ourselves into the shoes of people who have different beliefs to try to understand why it is that they think the way they do and how that matters to them. I mean, I was brought up as a Catholic, so I have some understanding of that, although I have to admit my Catholic upbringing was not very Catholic. I mean, we were we were mildly Catholic, but not like really strongly Catholic. So from that kind of point of view, everything is referred to God, so to the existence of some kind of divinity or divine power. And we, as individuals, in some way are an expression or reflection of that divine power. Again, this can be formulated in so many different ways. But if we are speaking of not self, and we are speaking of dependent origination, then these are views that can be very challenging to that kind of view. It's not just like having a differing opinion on an intellectual matter. It's something which is a fundamental threat to the perspective from which people see the world. And if you're used to seeing everything in terms of God's will and God's wish and living according to God's values and so on, then it seems like chaos to just throw all that away and say, well, we're living in this universe with nothing. And for them, it's hard to see the difference between what the Buddha taught and what the secularists teach, right? You're throwing out God, you're throwing out an eternal soul. Who's to provide the moral guidance? Who's to provide the values? So this is, I think, important to understand, that there are reasons why people from that kind of background will find it difficult to understand these teachings. There was a remark by one of the great Hindu sages in the, I think, early 20th century. I think it might have been Swami Vivekananda, but don't quote me on that. I can't recall exactly. And he said something like, "We Hindus have never understood Buddhism." And I'm like, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And I think that there's an important point there. I think it's probably also true, maybe, that we don't understand Hinduism or whatever as well. But I think that there's an important point there where there is that sense of attachment to one's own beliefs that makes it hard to understand the beliefs of another. Now, the idea that rebirth can be explained by reference to an eternal soul is an idea that superficially seems plausible, because the body dies, that's impermanent, but the soul continues, so that is permanent. Okay, so there's a superficial similarity to that. But when you start to poke that idea a little bit, that superficial plausibility tends to disappear a little bit, because what is the process of rebirth if not a process of change? And so how are we using something eternal to explain that process of change? That argument is also applicable to the understanding of our own sense experience. So an eternalist might say, well, yes, the sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, even the thoughts, the things in your mind, these are all impermanent. But myself, my soul, my jiva, my atman, that is permanent. But if we can't see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think it, or know it in any way, what exactly is it? And how is that meaningful? Now, some would say, and the teachers before the time of the Buddha would say, that what that self is, that Atman is the knowing itself, the vijnana. That is what it is. But then this is why the Buddha analyzed vijnana as being also impermanent. Vijnana itself is impermanent and subject to conditions. So this, to my mind, highlights the fundamental flaw in the theory of the Atman. The theory of the Atman is there to explain something, but it doesn't actually explain anything. It's just a word we use in lieu of having an explanation, because anything that you want to try to explain has to be then shifted another layer to be explained in terms of a self. Oh yes, you're not experiencing your feelings, but your Atman is experiencing the feelings. Yeah, You're not experiencing your memory, but your Atman is experiencing the memory. Okay, but how does that help me to understand feelings? How does that help me to understand memory? We've just shifted the explanation further away. The same thing with rebirth. Oh, yes, yes. It's not this temporary mind that's experiences rebirth. It's not these feelings that experience rebirth. It's your Atman that experiences rebirth. But how does that help me to understand rebirth? Now, this Buddhist critique of the idea of the Atman as an explanatory tool was so effective that it was adopted by a number of Hindu philosophers. So a number of Hindu philosophers following the Buddha agreed with the Buddha. Yes, you're right. That which experiences and knows and all of those kinds of things, that can't be what takes rebirth. In fact, they would say rebirth has nothing to do with the Atman. Right? So this is a kind of a minority position, but this is what some philosophers within Hinduism argued following the Buddha's critique. They essentially agreed with the Buddha that rebirth couldn't involve something eternal. Doesn't make sense, fine. It doesn't. Rebirth is a transient thing. It doesn't involve the Atman. Of course, there still is an Atman, which is eternal. It just doesn't have anything to do with rebirth. So this is the eternalist perspective on rebirth. And so this is why I believe that when people from that background and with that conditioning find it so puzzling and hard to accept the idea of rebirth from a Buddhist perspective, that they really kind of stumble and don't find it to be coherent. Now, the other side is the materialist side, the sabannati, everything will perish. Yeah? Now, materialists don't believe that there's going to be a rebirth. They believe that this life happens and that everything is going to pass away. Now, of course, there's no evidence for this view, and there are whole laws of physics. They're like laws of thermodynamics. So energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Mind is an energy. I don't know how that doesn't fit into that law, but anyway, the idea is that our mind or our consciousness is in some way generated by our brains. So our brains cause our minds, or our brains are our minds, something like that. Bit hard to say. And often people from a secularist point of view believe that this view is scientific. Now, it's one thing it's kind of I found has been somewhat curious is that most of the scientists that I know and that I work with very frequently don't actually believe this. They certainly don't believe that the idea of annihilation is a scientific view. It's actually a philosophical interpretation. It's not something that science can prove or disprove. And in my experience, scientists themselves are well aware of this and don't try to kind of argue that science disproves rebirth or anything like that. But again, in my experience, it's people who aren't scientists and who don't have much experience with how science works, who somehow imagine that science has proven that there's no such thing as rebirth. Now, if you think that there's nothing after death, there's nothing to explain, then obviously, if you're interested in Buddhism, either the Buddha, when teaching dependent origination, either he was completely wrong, or dependent origination means something other than we thought it was. And of course, this is what we've seen a lot in modern Buddhism, starting in like the middle of the 20th century, and then from then on till now, where it seems like every second person has some new and radical and wonderful theory of dependent origination, exactly what it's about and what it means and so on and so forth. And suddenly this teaching, which was regarded as being a fairly stable teaching for 2,500 years, has become very unstable and has been pressed into service by people for all kinds of different reasons. Now, I think we need to walk a little bit of a middle ground here. Dependent origination is an extremely profound and subtle teaching that has many implications and can be creatively adapted and applied in many different areas. And I think it's important that we understand this and encourage it. At the same time, when the Buddha taught dependent origination, he taught it for a particular purpose. And that purpose was to explain about how rebirth happens without a soul. So what dependent origination does is it teaches 12 factors, 12 links, which have a causal relation to each other and which express the unfolding of a life and a process of development and growth and origination in life. Now, I'm not going to talk about dependent origination in a lot of detail here, but I will mention just a couple of details. But just to wrap up what I was saying about the secularist point of view, I think it's important with the secularist point of view is that people who have a secularist point of view often believe that they are simply following the facts. They believe that what they're saying is rational, that it's based on science, and so on. Now, and they say that sincerely, right? So they believe that they are in a sense one of what I believe, and apologies to anyone here who this might upset, but I believe this is one of the roots of the secularist delusion, is that materialist delusion, I should say, is that it believes that we can, or that we have found the truth of human consciousness through material means. And I don't believe that's true at all. And I don't think we found anything like that, or anything even vaguely close to that. I had a very nice discussion about this once with a neuroscientist who was the head of the neuroscience at a big university hospital in Australia. And she just laughed when I just mentioned this. Have we discovered the seat of consciousness in the brain? She's like, absolutely not even vaguely close to anything like that. We don't even have any kind of theory or concept of what that might be. And so the actual science is way behind this idea. So if you think that somehow I'm just accepting the science by having a materialist view, I really think that that's very far from the truth. In reality, the secularist view, in my view, is mostly driven by a how do I put this? It's mostly a side effect of material progress. So we've seen so much material progress in so many ways that we've now seen that we can explain so many things through understanding the physics, understanding the chemistry, and so on, that there's then an assumption that then we'll be able to understand everything else. We'll be able to understand the mind, we'll be able to understand all of these different kinds of things. And so it's just a matter of time before we will be able to do this. And this, I believe, is like a fundamental, rational principle underlying a materialist point of view. One of the many problems with that is this very simple fact. Our materialist science, physics, chemistry, and the applications of that in engineering and so on, has been incredibly successful. And our application of scientific method has been unbelievably successful at some things. It's been almost completely unsuccessful at a whole range of other things, including, I would say, understanding the mind and understanding human society and understanding human culture. And we have been doing science-based psychology for 100-something years or more. And honestly, we seem to have just as many crazy people as we had then. And I'm not really sure that we really made much advance at all in any of those realms of quote unquote science. So I don't believe that scientific method is a universal path to truth. I think it's very good for some things and not very good for other things. And I don't think that there's any reason to believe that science is going to suddenly turn around and explain consciousness or anything like that. I think this is just wishful thinking. So as far as secularists go, again, the idea of rebirth challenges their perception and challenges the choices that they've made in life. They've come to an acceptance or an understanding of their view, and this comes along something which then massively expands that world. And it's like to think of those past lives and those future lives. It's something which is so mind-blowing. It's like you've lived your whole life just on a planet with a cloud-covered sky, and you've never seen the stars. And then one day you wake up and the clouds have gone and you see all the other stars and the other worlds. You can't take it in, you can't comprehend it. And I think until people reach a moment, because I also used to be a secularist. I mentioned before I was brought up as a Catholic. I rejected Catholicism. I was about 15. And then I was a secular atheist, materialist atheist for 10 years or something. And so, but for me, that was the same thing. It was like there's a moment when you have a perception of somehow that stream of consciousness. I'm not talking about any great deep meditative insight or something. It's just a realization, and just to realize actually this is something which is so vast and so ramified and so beyond just this small thing that we can see here. So anyway, so I've spoken a little bit about the how we explain rebirth without a soul. I explained a little bit about the eternalist and annihilationist point of view, and about hopefully encouraging you to, rather than simply dismiss views that are different from yours, to try to have a sympathetic understanding of where people are coming from and to understand why the views that they have matter to them. And if we can think like that, then we at least have the beginnings of a conversation. And just to remember that very often these things are things that we can't, they're like, you can't force them or push them because they depend on an individual's personal development. So, we can say what we can say, but we just have to wait for those seeds to mature. Now, finally, I come to the last part of the talk, which I said I would talk in a little bit more technical detail, or a little bit more specific detail, about how this works in the context of dependent origination as a whole. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning with ignorance. Avidya, right? Unknowing, the what Buddha called the Mahatamo Kanda, the great mass of darkness. When the Buddha talked about ignorance, he didn't mean that we don't know anything, obviously. And he didn't mean that we don't even have correct knowledge or insight or wisdom, because obviously people do have those kinds of things. But there's something fundamental that we're missing. Something fundamental that just we don't get. Now, I don't know about you, but I find myself often going around in life and having to make choices about things without necessarily really understanding those things. And we are often faced with circumstances where, do we do this? Do we do that? Is this the right thing? Is that the wrong thing? And yet somehow we have to do something. So this is, the Buddha said, is avidya pacaya sankhara, ignorance conditions sankharas. Now I translate sankharas as choices, and I do that for a very specific reason. That's a long topic, I won't discuss it in detail, but basically independent origination, when the Buddha is talking about sankharas, primarily what he means is those volitional choices that have a moral dimension. Punya visankhara, apunya visankhara, anenja visankhara is how it's defined. So that means that those things that we choose for good, for ill, anenja pertains technically to fourth jhana and above, so that doesn't quite fall into that scheme, but things we choose for good or for ill. These are the things that drive our consciousness on in samsara. Not just any old thought, not just any old choice, not just any old intention, right? But those intentions that are imbued with a moral significance. Yeah? That is what drives our consciousness on in samsara. Think about it. Think about how that works, okay? Think about when you've done something wrong, when you've done something that hurts someone. Like if I'm sitting here, if I think of something that I did wrong and harmful, I can think of something I did wrong and harmful when I was in my 20s. And it comes back to me as fresh as that. And I feel this sense of guilt and this sense of, oh my God, how could I do that? How can I say that? How can I agree to go along with that? And I can feel that. And that's how powerful these moral choices are. In the same way, if we remember something that we have done that is good, that creates this powerful impression. And we can remember that also. This is why these good and bad acts are creating such a fundamental impression and direction in the flow of our consciousness. So driven by these things, then our stream of consciousness finds rebirth. Then it grows in the mother's womb, develops, and the Buddha explains this in a very organic process. He talks about the conception of the embryo in the womb. He talks about the development of it. He talks about the birth of the child. He talks about the child playing games. That's in the Mahapranasankhaya Sutta. The story about conception and so on is mostly in the Mahanidana Sutta, DN 15. And in the Mahadana Hasankaya Sutta, it talks about how he grows up and plays childish games, is nursed by his mother, plays games, grows up, and so on. And so it's definitely taught within this context of an organic birth and growth of an individual. And then as you grow older, you can then learn to make choices. So, of course, a young infant, a young baby, is not really capable of making morally meaningful choices. I mean, maybe to a small degree, but not really. We don't hold a baby morally responsible in the same way we do an adult. But when you grow up, you become a teenager, and then become an adult, then yes, you are held responsible for your choices. So this is what this process of dependent origination means. When we engage in that process, we continue to make more choices and we continue to get reborn again. Now, one of the critical parts of this is that we have the process starting with ignorance, choices, conditions, and so on and so forth and so forth. And then you have the senses, like 6 senses, contact, feeling, craving, and then getting reborn in the future. Now, this part in the middle is especially interesting because you experience things, you react to those things, you have they create feeling, pleasant, painful, and neutral feeling, and then you react with craving. I want to have more pleasant feeling. I want to get rid of the bad feeling. I don't care about the neutral feeling. These are what then drive consciousness to continue on in the future. But those middle parts are the things that we can observe right now. So when the Buddha talked about the Dhamma being observable, that's what we can observe. We can look into our own mind at any time and see, oh yeah, sense experience. I can hear something. I can see my reaction to it. Ah, yeah, I can see my craving to it. I can see my attachment. You're watching these things. Now, of course, those things contain the microcosm of the whole thing. Right? So when we talk about dependent origination, we talk about it happening over 3 lives: the past life, the present life, and the future life. Right? But of course, all of those factors are present all the time. Right? We just split it up to explain it. But the reality is, of course, we have ignorance inside us. Yes, of course, we have sankharas, and we can see these things. But the way the pattern unfolds over that period describes the process of how that works over multiple lives. And so this works in a way like a spiral. Like it's being driven, it changes, like it's never exactly the same, but it's also not completely different because the patterns keep repeating. So to understand dependent origination from a contemplative and from a deeper point of view, right? We can study it and study the suttas and study the texts, but if we understand it from a more deep point of view, that's where we have to look into a meditation. Especially meditation, understanding the 6 senses, understanding the feelings that come from them, understanding how we react to those feelings. This is seeing those middle factors of dependent origination. And these are some of the fundamental principles of especially vipassana meditation or insight meditation. So when we see these kinds of things, right, and this is one moment which is very important in developing vipassana meditation, is the moment when you really start to see how your craving comes out in response to these feelings. Yeah, it might be a sound. Ah, it's an annoying sound. What's that person next to me? Or why are they shifting? Yeah, or it might be a memory. Ah, I remember that day. Yeah. Or it might be some kind of desire. Yeah, sexual desire. Maybe a desire for food. Maybe whatever it might be, and you feel these things happening inside yourself, and you can see that reaction going. Ah, what's going on? And you can start to say, oh, yeah, that's what's driving that. Ah, you can see it. And so the more that we can still our mind and find peace and clarity in meditation, then the more clearly we can see the arising of these different impulses that are driving the round of dependent origination. And we can see that, of course, there's no one there. There's no one person that's doing this. These are conditions. They are changing. They are growing. Yes, there's a continuity. There's not like a complete shift from one moment to the next, but each feeling, each response is individual. And that is very important because that means that we can make a difference. Ah, that's so important. Things change. We've experienced suffering. That suffering's changing. That suffering's going to come to an end because everything comes to an end. And we can see our own reaction from craving, from grasping that's driving this thing, that too is impermanent. and that too will come to an end. And this is where we can start to have hope. I can see now, the Buddha, this is what the Buddha was teaching about. We can let go of this craving, and then we can stop driving this round of samsara. That's so nice. Yeah. I can do it. Every time that you see that, every time that you see inside yourself that it's possible to see craving and let go of it, then you are confirming for yourself the truth of the Buddha's teachings. And the deeper that you go into that and the further you see that, then the more you'll be able to understand the full ramifications of the dependent origination. So that's just a few words for you this evening on this topic of dependent origination and how rebirth happens without a soul. And I began by giving what I hope was a fairly simple and straightforward explanation in modern language. Then I gave some reflections on the perspectives of the eternalists and annihilationists, who both, I believe, struggle unnecessarily with this viewpoint. And I expressed the view that to me, this is not an inherently difficult question, but it is made more. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't subtleties and complexities to it. I'm saying that it's just made more problematic than it needs to be because of the underlying assumptions that the eternalists and annihilationists are bringing to it. And finally, I gave some more detailed explanation in terms of the factors of dependent origination without going into too much, but at least to give an outline of how this works within the context of dependent origination itself. So that's my talk for you this evening. Thanks, Lakshman and everybody else for giving me the opportunity to share some Dhamma with you this evening. I don't know if there's any questions. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Thank you very much, Bhante. I think Bhante went through in detail with all those facts. And what I would like is maybe, rather than me go through it, we have Venerable Vajrarame Jnanasihatheru. Maybe I'm sure he will have some comments. Venerable Vajrarame Jnanasihatheru, can we have your comments and any suggestions that you may have?
No comments, but I was interested because these days I'm reading Venerable Jnanananda's Paticcasamuppada.
Okay, yes.
Yes, and his explanation of the Paticcasamuppada. And that's the interest that I thought that I would like to listen to you, or Venerable Sir, also, and find out. And I agree very much, but say that it's really your understanding. I understand, but the point is that understanding is only momentarily. For that moment, I understand, and that's what it is. But what is required, possibly, is the mind that understanding, which is momentary, should be that. Should be something that's the understanding that is actually necessary. Where sometimes you're trying to understand rebirth, we try logically, but the point is, as you mentioned, every moment we are uppada, tithibhanga, uppada, we are, but we are not conscious. But we are thinking of the final, of this particular thing, and that we are concerned. We want to know what happens, but that will happen on its own momentum, as was mentioned. Your good karma, your bad karma, everything that will happen. But the moment important thing is the moment, and as to how it is, how the factors, the change in the factors that are there, as the Buddha mentioned, verily, as you know, Venerable Sir, that rebirth is there because of the certain factors that are there. But if it's to get rid of those factors, there is no birth, there is no rebirth. So the important thing is that. But we are still concerned, and also, as you mentioned, we are concerned with generally the neuroscience that is happening and everything, all those things, and try to use that, trying to understand Buddha Dhamma. But as from the point of view of a person who is a Buddhist, we have to understand the Buddha's teaching from the Buddha's point of view. But if it's from outside, it's a different, because if it's a Christian, he's trying to see what it is, then he has his own. But the point is that we try to get those values and try to understand Buddhism rather than trying to understand the Buddha's words themselves. So these are some of the thoughts that came to mind as I listened to you, Venerable Sir.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much, Venerable. Yeah.
Can I ask Uday? I think he's in the IT and digital area. Maybe since Bhante mentioned certain things on fax machines and other areas, do you have any comments or suggestions?
No, it's a lot of interesting in different perspectives Bante spoke about. Very interesting. But I want to note something very interesting. The word sankara itself is being defined in different ways, or rather, it's a difficult thing to understand. But Bante put it in a simple way. The word choice is a choice related to the choices and how you make. I think that's very important to understand. Or it simplifies, but it has a lot of meaning behind it. I
Right.
think
Yeah.
it is. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Definitely. It definitely has. Obviously, it has different meanings in other contexts. And you can explain it in different ways in dependent origination, but I think that's the primary meaning in dependent origination, not necessarily the only meaning. But you're always going to miss something in translation. But that's the choice that I made. Yeah.
Bhante, we can go through the questions that have been there are about 6, 7 questions.
Well,
You want me to read, or you will like to share?
why don't I'll go through the questions myself, and then I can make sure I can filter them myself. Okay, I think I can see them. Okay, here we go. So Jaika asks whether anicca could be interpreted as uncertainty besides impermanence as conventionally translated. Yeah, it does have a similar kind of sense. Ajahn Chah, the teacher in my lineage, always used to use the word maner, which means uncertain or not a sure thing for anicca. So it does have a similar kind of sense, but the primary sense really in the suttas is basically that something's there and then it's going to not be there. And so that's where impermanence comes in. So I think impermanence is definitely the primary meaning of it. Okay. Very good. Ranjit, how are you going, Ranjit? I hope you're having a great day. When a person is born, is his life predestined by past karma? Oh my goodness. Or is it more influenced by where he's born and the exposures one has by his own efforts, as well as the country he's born, the parents and the religious background of the society he's born to? Well, look, I would say that both things have an effect. So the Buddha certainly did not say that your life is predestined by past karma. And I think this is something that is often misunderstood in Buddhist circles. And I think, to be honest, that this is a unwarranted import of Hindu ideas into Buddhism. Because in Hinduism, it's much more apt to say that you're born into that caste because that's your past karma, and that therefore that's how you have to live. So from a Buddhist point of view, the word karma means your action. And the Buddha would always emphasize that karma means how you decide to act and what you do and how you live your life. So the primary thing that affects us is how we live our life. Now, of course, what karma does determine is, first of all, karma determines where you take rebirth, right? So karma from your past lives is pointing you to a certain direction for rebirth. And then that is, you get born in the human realm or another realm and so on. So that is certainly determined by karma. Bear in mind that according to Buddhist teachings, human rebirth is a fortunate rebirth. So even if you're born in a very poverty-stricken or very disadvantaged location, then the fact that you're born as a human still means that you have good karma that enabled you to be reborn as a human. Why? Because you can do something about it. Because even if you're born in very deprived circumstances, you can still choose how to live and what kind of person you can be. So human realm is always regarded as being a good rebirth. Now, during the course of your life, okay, karma from past lives is one of the factors that's affecting you, but also the karma you make in this life, as well as you mentioned, the various other things that are happening around us. And so these days, I'm pretty sure most of the people on this call would have a mobile phone. And it is not the case that in a past life, we all committed having a mobile phone karma, and that's what made mobile phones suddenly spring into existence, that we have a mobile phone. No. The reason we have mobile phones is because of the development of technology through society that's made it possible for us to have that. And so these are things that happen independently of the law of karma. So karma operates in a complex web of different kinds of causality. So I think it's really important to remember this, and that important that when encountering people who are disadvantaged, people who are afflicted by poverty, people who are afflicted by illness, people who are disabled, people who have all these kinds of social disadvantages, that we remember that that's not because they're somehow morally worse than us and that they're getting punished for something bad that they did. We remember that these are people who are vulnerable and who are in need of our care and compassion. Don't forget that in a past life you were there, and in a future life, unless you get enlightened, you will be there again. And so, or any kind of cruelty or neglect that you give to people who are more disadvantaged, that's your karma that you're making right now. That's the important thing. All right, very good. Let's continue. Ranjit, thanks for that great question. Geeta, how's it going, Geeta? I hope you're having a wonderful day. When we travel in samsara, is it a form of energy that travels along with our habit energies? Yeah, and taking rebirth according to our karma, and then is nibbana making an ending of this journey? Sure, that sounds like a nice description. Yeah, so we are but a flow of energies, good and bad, all of those things. Nibbana, flame going out. Okay, let us move along. Anonymous, how are you going, Anonymous? I hope you're doing well. Could rebirth be just a reconditioning of energies, as anything in the universe is energy driven? And this energy in humans is the consciousness that keeps re-becoming until that consciousness energy is extinguished like a flame at Nibbana. Pretty much, yes. And another translation of Sankara we discussed a little bit earlier would be energies. Right? So Sankara literally means like the energies. How can that explain the theory of energy cannot be created or destroyed? It just changed, right? So yeah, good question. So I alluded to the laws of thermodynamics and the idea that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? Now, Nibbana would seem to be an exception to that, yeah? Why? Well, because the physicists who came up with the law of thermodynamics didn't know anything about Nibbana. They weren't including that in their consideration, right? They used that law to describe the world that they observe, which is, of course, the world of samsara. And as far as the world of samsara goes, then that's true. But Nibbana is something else. So I would say that Nibbana is the exception to those laws. Okay, moving on. Is the craving, conscious energy driven by craving? Yes, that is correct. And then through samsara till the wanting is abandoned. Yes. Very good. So are there any similarities between the Vijnana concept and the Atman concept? If not, where do they differ from each other? Are they different forms of energy? So the difference is that Vijnana is something which is observable. Okay, so Vijnana is an aspect of your mind, but specifically the awareness in your mind. And we can become aware of our awareness, especially through meditation. And we develop a more subtle, intuitive, and wisdom-driven understanding of our own consciousness, which we can observe. Okay, Atman is not something that can really be observed. It's a metaphysical idea, which is based on the idea that something is changeless, but we never actually observe anything that's changeless. It's based on the idea that something is an emanation of God, but we can never really observe God. We can never see. The Atman is attributed these properties which are not observable, whereas Vijnana is attributed properties that are observable. All right. We're going. So sorry, just having to scroll up the list. Okay, next one. When we meditate and practice Dhamma, no, meditating and practice Dhamma to achieve, isn't that just a craving for Nibbana? No. The craving that leads to suffering is Yayang Tanha Pona Bhavika, the craving for rebirth. Craving for Nibbana is not a problem. Crave Nibbana all you like. What will happen is that the closer you get to it, you will let go of it. You see, the difference here is that when we crave for worldly things, we crave for things that actually aren't satisfying. And that's why our craving needs to keep being renewed. I might crave a drink, and when I have a drink, it could quench my thirst for a while, but then I'll be thirsty later, so I'll have more craving. But the craving for Nibbana is a craving for something that actually is genuinely satisfying. So once we reach it, we let go of our craving. Okay, fine. Moving on. I won't answer all of these questions. I apologize because I'm conscious that we're getting near the end of time, but I will try to answer as many as I can. Okay, so that one's more of a comment. So I'm just trying to see if there's a way. Oh, that's better, more stable. Sorry, the window for the comments was a bit unstable, but that's a better way of seeing it. Okay, great. Some of these questions are, I'm afraid, are just a little bit too specific to address satisfactorily. So I'm going to skip over them. I'm sorry for those whose questions I don't answer, because I'm conscious that we're kind of running out of time. I'll just answer those that I think that I can answer acceptably in time. So one question asked is an interesting question from Ratna. How are you going, Ratna? I hope you're doing well, Ratna Nandabande. How does Vijnana or consciousness choose the mother or the womb for rebirth to take place? Interesting question, right? Obviously driven by karma. Now, if we look at cases of rebirth, right, so cases especially where children have recollected their past lives or something, then often you can see that there's like an element of continuity or something there, that maybe, for example, they might be reborn in a local area, or maybe in a family, or maybe with some kind of affinity or connection, but also sometimes not. So I think there's also a kind of an element, almost a random element there too, or perhaps something that we can't really discern. So it's a kind of an interesting question. But of course, one thing that's got to happen is that there's got to be, well, you know, not every woman is ready to conceive at every time, right? Well, there have to be all of the conditions there for the woman to be ready. So in some ways, you've got to, you know, it's like you're about buying a new home, right? You can't just think I'm going to buy the home that I want. You have to buy the one that's for sale. So I think there's, yeah, it's a complex process. Yes. So Kunzang Wangdi, how are you going, Kunzang? Asks, is dependent origination the same as what Nagarjuna taught? Again, a very interesting question. I believe so, yes. I mean, Nagarjuna claimed to be teaching dependent origination and to be teaching emptiness. And he claimed to be dispelling misconceptions about what dependent origination was. Personally, I love Nagarjuna's philosophy, and I think that's probably correct. Okay, how is DNA and inheritance explained in Buddhism? It isn't really. Yeah, we don't really, there's no concept of DNA, but there is a concept of what they call bija, obviously, which is like a biological inheritance, but that's separate from the law of karma. And so the karma isn't passed down through DNA. Okay. Okay, so Guy asks, if we're a different person now and 10 years ago, why do you hate or dislike something for things that happened long ago, right? Delusion, yes, ignorance, yeah, get caught up in this anger, yeah, because we're changing all the time, right? So this is why, if you have that insight, if you really understand that, then you wouldn't do that. So if you find that you are immersing anger to people from all that long ago, clearly you're delusional, and that's a sign that your insight isn't deeper. And so, yeah, that's how that works. Okay, last one. Hin Ong, I hope you're well. I think hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. Says, I think our existence is but a dream, and rebirth means a transition from one dream to another. It's one way of explaining the nature of the various realms of existence. Maybe, yes, interesting idea. I mean, I mean, a complicated question to go into in any detail, okay? But I think that the Buddha described his experience as the experience of awakening. And so in a sense, yes, our existence is like a dream because there's delusion, there's ignorance. Things are not what they seem. It doesn't mean that everything is completely just a dream, but it just means that the way that we see it is filtered through our own perceptions. Yeah? And so when we wake up, then we can see things yatha bhuta, as they really are. So thanks for that comment, and thanks to all of you for your comments and for your presence.
Thank you, Bante. Since Deepika is here, Deepika, you have any comments you like to make?
You are muted, Deepika.
Yeah, mute. I think.
Okay. Yeah. No comments. No, it was every time I hear Bante, I sort of learn something new. He puts the same thing at different angles. So thank you so much, Bante, for the teaching. Radha is here with me as well. So no, we listen diligently. And so every time it's a different way of teaching us. Thank you so much.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Deepika. So, can I invite Kamal to pay merit to Bante? You have to unmute Kamal.
Right. Thank you, Lakshman. So, thank you, Bante Sujato, for joining us again on the International Dhamma sessions. Our thanks to Ms. Deepika Vijakon for kindly assisting us on this occasion. The special Dhamma talk, Dependent Origination and Metta Meditation, a very interesting sermon explaining the values of loving kindness and consciousness, rebirth, understanding challenges of life, views on rebirth and personal development, about choices and cravings, impermanence. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We are thankful to Venerable Vajirarame Nanasiya Thero and other venerables and bhikkhunis and all our Dhamma friends participating from all over the world. Today we had over 155 participants. And today is another interesting point. We had so many questions. I think the highest number of questions, which reflects the importance of your Dhamma talk. Thank you very much. And finally, on behalf of the committee, thank you, Lakshman, for organizing this very important Dhamma program. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kamal. And may I just add to what your comment about the questions, not only just a lot of questions, but also very good quality questions. People were clearly listening carefully and asking some really interesting and insightful questions there.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Bante, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kamal. Thank you very much, Bante. I know that today was quite a busy day, and as Bante mentioned, Bante was visiting the parents, but still made time available for us. And I must thank also Deepika for making the arrangements earlier. So definitely we are very, very thankful. And as I said, this was a special Dhamma talk that Bante had given. And I know that Bante has a close connection with Sri Lanka, and also Bante has visited Sri Lanka many times and also conducted the meditation programs, which we greatly appreciate, and also pay merit to Bante. So Bante, once again, while paying merit to Bante, we will now conclude the sessions, and I will invite Bante to pay merit to the Devas and the departed, and close the Dhamma talk. So.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Etavata jamhehi sambhatam punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata jamhehi sambhatam punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya Etavata cha amhehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe sattan modantu sabba sampati siddhyati idam menyatinam hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo idam menyatinam hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo Idam me nyatinam hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo.
Thank you very much, Bante, and we pay much merit to you, and we do hope that we'll be able to invite Bante in the coming months for another Dhamma session.
Sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu.
sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you very much, Lakshman. May you be happy.